Well, my name is Constanza Sanchez. I'm research assistant at the Global Drug Policy Observatory at Swansea University. It's my pleasure today to be talking to Dr. Axel Klein, social anthropologist at the University of Kent. We'll be talking to Axel today about the role and the impact of development aid, specifically European Union development aid, over the illicit drug situation in West Africa. So, Axel, to start with, I wonder if you could tell us more about the expansion of the security aspect of development aid programs funded by the European Commission in West Africa and the potential impact this expansion may have over the illicit drug situation in the region.
Okay, hello Constanza, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this. First, when it comes to the so-called securitization of aid, development assistance, this is not just something that affects European Union development assistance in West Africa, but overall. And there has, over the last 10 years, been a rather dramatic increase in the budgetary allocation for programs in the security sector. And this includes the allocation of funds for West Africa. And I have to say that it is not just the European Union. Other donors, particularly the UK agency DFID, Department of International Development, but also USAID, have increasingly shifted funds from traditional development sector support towards funding security sector reform, that is law enforcement, the military, and the judiciary. In West Africa, what is interesting perhaps is that many of these programs are not implemented by national agencies, but they're being administered or managed by UN agencies, principally the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. This is also interesting because the UNODC has been one of the most vocal advocates for more to the global community to pay more attention to the West African trafficking route. So in West Africa, and of course when we talk about West Africa, we've got to keep in mind that the largest country is Nigeria, who has a population which is larger than the rest of the countries combined. This is the most significant player here. It's the major recipient. It's now just received, and I think this year a program came on stream which has allocated something like 30 million euros for drug control and crime control measures right across the board, from mainly supply reduction, but there's also considerable control for demand reduction, that's treatment and prevention activities. There's also support for a regional program which would be administered again by UNODC to support the Economic Community of West Africa, or ECOWAS, which in 2008 made the Abuja Declaration to tackle drug trafficking and organized crime at a regional level, and then went to formulate this what came to be known as the prior plan, and the EU committed itself to supporting it, and the funding is about to come on stream for that. And I think we're talking something like 20 million euros for a number of regional projects. And these are very much about capacity building within law enforcement, in the law enforcement sector, information sharing, the provision of training and some hardware to facilitate law enforcement agencies to cooperate better and deal with the so-called organized crime threat. Right.
Okay, thank you, Axel. On the other hand, as you mentioned, the European Union remains the largest overall donor in the region. So what's its level of involvement in illicit drug issues in West Africa, both law enforcement activities and health-oriented drug control programs?
Well, as I said, it funds these programs, like the programs in Nigeria at a national level, the ECOWAS program. It also funds a number of other programs out of the Instrument for Stability, But the European Union is a donor. It does not implement these things itself. It doesn't have the capacity, for instance, to implement security sector programs, and therefore it looks towards contracting agencies to do that for it. Primarily this will be the UNODC, it could also be Interpol, or it could be a number of private sector consortia, often attached to ministries in the EU member states. GIZ from Germany would be one of them. So it's these agencies that then implement the training, the provision of hardware, the building up of joint task forces, and this seems to be one of the key drivers, and it's born from EU-wide experience in law enforcement, that great benefits are gained when law enforcement agencies cooperate, but particularly customs agencies with the various police agencies. In the Francophone countries we have, for instance, the judicial police in addition to other police forces. If you get these various law enforcement agencies to cooperate by exchanging information, pooling resources, and finding a common standard of operation procedures, then it is believed that the capacity is much enhanced. What is often not said, that law enforcement, interdisciplinary law enforcement cooperation is also a fairly effective form of reducing corruption, at least initially. And corruption is, of course, the biggest problem to facing the efficacy of any kind of counter-trafficking, but also any form of crime fighting in the region. A difficult one, a hard nut to crack. Different agencies have different approaches. I know that the US and the UK bilateral agencies, the Drug Enforcement Administration, for instance, or serious and organized crime agencies, when they recruit partners in Ghana, for instance, where they work, they will vet them and provide them with a salary uplift. The EU does not do this, and I think it is something that's quite corrosive and divisive for the partner agencies, even though individual officers would benefit. EU does not do so. So the corruption problem remains unaddressed. It's probably one of the main weaknesses in all this, because we find that time and again. Because one of the things we don't really have is a profile of organized crime in West Africa. We do not really know how these agencies, how these organizations are constituted, how they are recruited. But we have some information about the way that trafficking works, about the modus operandi, and that seems to often involve senior officials and law enforcement agents. So it can often be that the very beneficiaries of counter-trafficking training then use their skills to engage in trafficking themselves.
Okay.